alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to a new episode of Treasure Hunt. If you remember last time, we spoke about the importance of intention and how sincere we should be when giving da'wah. And we mentioned some sad examples from our Islamic history to learn from. Inshallah, in this episode, we'll be mentioning a very important characteristic, which is, if you recall, I mentioned there are two prerequisites for any action or deed to be accepted in Islam by Allah. The first one is that the person, when he does it, I'm talking about righteous deeds, he should do it for Allah's sake. Second one, he should do it according to the Quran and to the Sunnah, meaning with knowledge. So in this episode, inshallah, I'll be mentioning the knowledge and its status when it comes to da'wah. Does the da'iyah or the da'i Allah, does he have to be a professor? Does he have to be a sheikh? Does he have to be an imam, faqih, or what exactly? What kind of knowledge is needed from him? So knowledge here, the scholars, they say that the person who calls and invites mankind to Islam, he should be aware and knowledgeable about the basics of Islam. He should be able to explain what is Islam in simple terms to the non-Muslims, and should be aware of the, as I said, the basic things like the pillars of Iman, or you can call it articles of faith. You should be aware of the pillars of Islam and what scholars they call al-ma'lum wa ad-din bid-darura, meaning things which should be known, by each follower of the religion. So here's the thing: when it comes to knowledge, subhanallah, I'll give you an example also how I did last time to tell you like how the knowledge of prioritizing things in Islam could be really, really important for the da'iyah. Here's the thing: when Muslims went to Africa, they went all the way to Central Africa. SubhanAllah, at that time, that colony was actually occupied by the British. It was basically an African kingdom, and its followers were like tens of millions, and they were ruled by an African king. And the Muslims went there and they asked about how does stuff work in that society, and they came to know that the king, once he embraces Islam, then the entire nation would follow him. So they said, instead of giving da'wah to the people, let's give da'wah to the king. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open his heart, and if he embraces Islam and he becomes a Muslim, then the entire nation will become Muslims. So it was a great idea. So they went there and they spoke to the king. They explained Islam, and of course at that time those people and the king, their ruler, was a pagan, following African pagan ideology. And after speaking with him, he really liked Islam. He liked what Islam teaches, what Islam preaches, and he liked all the values pretty much. And he decided to become a Muslim. But subhanAllah, a very unfortunate thing happened, because those days, mashallah, they fulfilled the first prerequisite, which is sincerity. They were very sincere, and they really worked so hard. They went all the way to Central Africa. So after this person became a Muslim, or the king, his entire nation, they also followed him and they embraced Islam too. But then they told him, now that you are a Muslim, we ask you to actually be circumcised, because it's considered to be an obligation in Islam. It's considered to be a wajib, or it's something that is mandated upon each Muslim male. So the African people at that time, they actually believed that the body of the king is holy and he cannot touch it. So we're talking about something that is just, it's very, very awkward position here. And they finally, decided no. The king said, I'm not going to put myself through this. And the people also rejected the idea altogether. SubhanAllah. And who heard of what was happening? And I'm saying, like, this kingdom in today's world actually, or it used to be named Dae'e, if you recall, the famous match that happened in the 70s over there between Muhammad Ali Clay and his opponent. It happened in Zaire. where he did beat Foreman, if you remember. For those of you, of course, who are alive, but it's a very famous match. It happened actually in Zaire, which is in today's world named Congo, or the Republican, or the Democratic Republican of the Congo. So it was, according to the estimation of the scholars at that time, they said Zaire was like in the hundreds of millions of followers. So now we're talking about over 100 millions, because these countries were divided. But here's what happened. Who heard of this controversy, which really put the Muslims into, again, until this stage, the idea is still up in the air, and those people, after they became Muslims, they're still not sure what to do next. But the British, who were colonizing this kingdom, they opened the doors for the Christian missionaries to come to Africa and to preach Christianity. So the missionaries came to the king, and they heard of that controversy, and they told him, how about a religion that teaches and preaches everything that Islam teaches, but with no circumcision? And the king said, okay. And he actually became Christian, and all of his followers became Christian as well. So going back to the topic, brothers and sisters, the Da'i should have knowledge in Islam, and he should be able to prioritize things, and he should not be rigid when it comes to certain issues in Islam. Especially, we understand that the greatest priority is for the people to become Muslim. And remember that for 13 years, over 13 years, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the most honorable generation, the most noble generation, I'm talking about in the world, they were in the company of the most honorable Prophet. They were consuming alcohols for over 13 years in Mecca, and the Prophet ﷺ never forbade them until the verses came down. All of these ahkam, all of the rules, the Islamic law, the majority of it was actually revealed in Al-Madinah. There was a lot of things that were happening during the Meccan era. But then the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was just teaching people the Iman, teaching them Islam, opening their hearts, softening their hearts, and just working on, just educating the Muslims, and really making sure that the Iman gets to the heart, and to be, their hearts to be solid upon this beautiful faith. Because once the Iman is here, everything else would be easier. And if the hearts love you, they would love your da'wah. Always work on the hearts, always, because it's very sad to see, like these days, some of the Muslims who, when they call non-Muslims to Islam, or even their fellow brothers and sisters in Islam, they always give it in a very aggressive manner. They are very rigid. They are very aggressive. At the same time, they do not use wisdom. So I'm saying here, dear brothers and sisters, let's, inshallah, when we give da'wah, let's purify our intention and also have knowledge. Talking about knowledge, that will bring us to the third characteristic of the Da'i Allah, the caller who calls people to Islam, which is knowledge of the culture. The Da'i Allah should be able to determine the do's and don'ts of that culture, because he could be the greatest scholar of Islam, but then he does not know what's considered to be shameful in that society. He does not know what's what to ask, what not to ask, and he just goes and straight gives da'wah like this without learning about the culture. So knowledge of the culture is extremely, extremely important. And as I said, in the story of the African kingdom, had they known the culture, those guys, and knew that the body, or their king basically is considered to be a divine and his body is holy, they would not have asked about such a thing. But the Da'i must understand the knowledge of the culture, and so that he can utilize that when he gives da'wah to the people, and that will make it so easy. That brings us to another characteristic, which is, if you remember in the first episode, we mentioned ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة. Subhanallah, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us that command, He told us, when you call mankind to Islam, make sure that you use wisdom. And what's the meaning of hikmah? Subhanallah, hikmah here is explained by Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, in a very beautiful narration when he said that خاطب الناس على قدر عقولهم. Talk to people according to their understanding. Otherwise, you'll cause those people to deny Allah and His Messenger. So hikmah, it means to be able to convey the message of Islam to the audience, based on their backgrounds, based on their personalities, based on their education, and so on and so forth. And the best way to gain al-hikmah is by reading the Sunnah. You'll find, especially in the Seerah, the autobiography of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you'll find that the Sahaba, during the period of Da'wah, when the Prophet ﷺ was approaching them, he approached them so differently. He approached the Sahabi who was like Jewish at the time differently from the one who was pagan, different from the one who was Christian, different from the leader of the tribe, different from the slave, different from the average person. So the Da'i should be flexible and should understand and should learn how to gain al-hikmah, and to be wise, and to be able to just come down to the level of the people. And inshallah, in the following episodes, we'll be elaborating on some other characteristics that will also educate us about how to get to people's levels and how to successfully, inshallah, convey the message of Islam. Until next time, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us al-hikmah. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa barik wa sallam ala nabiyyika Muhammad wa sallim tasliman kathira.